Hey everybody, what's going on? Rob Cesternino back with you to talk some amazing Race 35, episode number 10, as we go from 5 to 4 teams here this week. And we are without Jessica Liese, who is on assignment today. She will be back with us for the exit interview coming up on Thursday, but back with me to talk about it. A man who is always serving, sometimes sorting. Give it up for Mike Bloom.
I am so glad you said serving, Rob, because I don't know if you're speaking French or English, but I'd love for you to just rate this dish for this week.
Okay. Can you tell the people at home what this ensemble that you put together is?
Okay, look, here's the thing. Last week, perhaps the most comments we've received in response to an Amazing Race episode or an Amazing Race podcast was like, oh, can't wait for Mike Bloom to dress up like the Dragon Keeper. Where's Mike Bloom's Dragon Keeper costume? Looking forward to that Dragon Keeper costume. We'll be completely cards up here. The way the Swedish sausage gets made. We record these a bit earlier in the day. I did not have enough time to get a wig together. Took the holiday, said thank you to Amazon, Thanksgiving. Very grateful that they have that 2-day shipping. It arrived at my doorstep, and I said, better late than never. Let me throw this on, and much like that dragon, Rob.
You're the Dragon Keeper from last week.
Yes, I am.
Okay.
I mean, listen, I think given the quality of this episode, there wasn't any particular stuff to dress up about, considering there was so much to dress up from
I was like,
last week.
okay.
Let me pull from that.
All right. Mike, is there an earbud dangling from your wig? Is there?
It fell out.
It fell out? Okay.
I can't get it
I
out.
wasn't sure if that was part of the costume or it's just knotted in there.
I can't get it out.
Angela, could you bring a scissor? Yeah.
Oh my god, I don't understand how people with long hair do this.
Yes.
God.
Okay. You need a scrunchie, I think, for this podcast.
No, dragon keepers don't need scrunchies. I'll use a dragon's talon to tie back my hair.
I keep turning the camera back off. I don't know if I can have a serious conversation with you.
Seriously looking like
oh my
this?
god. Yes. Okay. All right. Boy, and Mike, did you also abstain from shaving for this performance also?
Yes, I did not take an expo marker and draw on my face 5 minutes before the podcast. This is 100% au natural realness. I should get a Nobel Prize for dressing up on podcasts.
You should.
Where's my salmon tartare?
All right. Mike, Todd and Ashley. Can you believe it?
Well, I was going to say I cannot believe it, but like 10 minutes in, I could kind of believe it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is unfortunately the 3rd out of 4 weeks where we have a team fall behind fairly early on in the leg due to 1 to 2 consequential errors and not necessarily be able to catch up, as much as that sort of train door cliffhanger may have led us to believe. Rob, you've watched a lot of reality TV. Be honest. Did you think when we see them running to this train as the doors are closing and we cut to black that they would have made it or not?
I would think that they would not have made it.
I agree. I think if they did, like in the moment, it was really exciting. It's something new we usually get for Amazing Race. Again, we usually see people do the task to completion. Clearly here, they were trying to build up some sort of climacticism, but I feel like had they gotten on the train, we would have seen them get on the train. The fact that we didn't, and we'll find out tomorrow as to like whether that was even the same train as everybody else. That could have just been a big edit as to like the other 3 teams were just so far ahead of Todd and Ashley that they were on another train completely. And so they did make it, but onto another train entirely. But yeah, it was a little bit of a excitement in the moment. But the more you especially think about reality TV editing, the more you're like, yeah, if this was exciting, they would have shown it.
It was a very exciting finish for the other 4 teams where we had a situation where I can't really recall one where the top 3 teams were sort of like all on foot, like looking for where the mat was. And it really seemed like any of them could have gotten it. And then just out of nowhere, here comes Joel and Garrett with a first place finish.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Could this be a forecast for the finale, perhaps, that we'll have two teams in it to win it, and then one team just kind of sneaks through entirely? I mean, I guess the true winner of this week is the subway in so
Hmm.
many ways. First off, the subway stations in Stockholm compared to New York City in both efficiency and artistic value, say magnifique, to quote
Hmm.
Greg. That is beautiful. But also, like, it's kind of wild, yeah, that I would say this episode was a bit of a continual tick down in quality from me from I think the sort of apex we hit a couple of episodes ago. Wasn't it? I thought it was last week was pretty good, not great. This week, I really liked the last 10 minutes because that's when like shit kind of hit the fan and you had three teams all running together trying to find this pit stop. And here comes Joel and Garrett just being in the right place at the right time, finding the subway station and winning the leg because of it.
Yeah. Did the other three teams, the top three teams, did they not take the subway to get to the mat? It seemed like that they were on foot and they
No,
were.
they did. Do you not recall Annalie like yelling at Steve, like, "Get your ass in gear, get on the train, the doors are closing." They did get on the subway, but obviously it was a later subway than Joel and Garrett.
Okay, got it.
And it was not
So
a bus, which I guess can oftentimes be confused with a subway.
I thought that was such a great moment in the episode where Steve and Annalie end up going on. They get to the violinist first. They get out, and the clue says to go by the subway, and then they get on a bus. And then here comes Rob and Corey, and they're telling the bus driver, like, close the door, don't let them in, don't let them in. We're in a race, leave, leave, leave. And they're like, hey. And Corey's like, this is a bus. It's not the subway.
I'm so confused in so many ways. Was Steve like, "Subway? That must be some sort of fancy Swedish term that means bus. You can't spell
It's-
subway without B-U-S."
yeah, that's some sandwich place. I guess. Is there? I don't know where they're from. Maybe there's
They're
not
from
a lot of.
Texas.
Yeah. Do they? Let me text Chappelle.
Yeah.
What's the subway situation like in
Honestly, that
Texas?
will be the cleanest question you'll ask Chappelle this week on the podcast that you do, so I think he'd be grateful for it. He'd be like, "Okay, what do I need to learn about condom laws in Texas? Why are you asking me this?"
Yeah. So yeah, but that was so funny that they were just
That
like,
was wild.
screw them, and they're like,
Well
hey, just want to let you know, this is a bus.
well, also, like, the entire exchange before that where Rob and Corey, we'll talk about the use of the express pass, don't know that the main entrance to the theater is the main entrance to the theater. They pull a pen holderness. They're like, "This can't be it." They're wandering around. Steve and Anna Lee do them a solid, and they're like, "Oh, it's actually in there." And so Corey and Rob return the favor. Little do they know that Steve and Anna Lee did not want the favor returned. They were ready to slam that bus door in the face of these two guys because they were so, so confident
Yeah.
that this indeed was the subway they were supposed to get onto, and this was going to catapult them into first place.
Yeah, and they end up working together throughout the bulk of the episode. And I thought, for Steve and Annalie, even though they end up with a fourth place finish, kind of a return to form for them, where they're back, like for most of the episode, back at the front of the pack.
Yeah, I mean,
Took a while.
Anna Beast really makes her, once again coming out party. I should say re-coming out party in this roadblock where she does it once, which a few of the teams did, but she did it at an alarming pace. I don't know if she's just a natural for the midsummer of it
Hmm.
all, but it's so interesting to have seen like Garrett react to and Greg react to Anna Lee of Greg really taking his time, seeing Anna Lee finish lightning quick and being like, okay, I guess the details don't necessarily matter. And then he fails the first try because, yes, they do matter.
Yeah, she made it seem so easy, where it's like, okay, well, I guess if she's able to just wing it like this, everybody else was spending so much time on it. It really seemed like that was where Todd and Ashley ended up getting off on the wrong foot.
Yeah, that was, I think, the major thing that did them in. And maybe we'll find out tomorrow if there were other things from a navigational perspective or even a task perspective that did them in. But unlike Robin and Chelsea, where last week it seemed like the roadblock and getting lost to the caves, it really did seem like, at least from the edit, it was just, they were second to last or basically tied with Rob and Corey getting to that roadblock. Rob and Corey used the express pass. And so Todd and Ashley are in last. And then Ashley is having a tough time weaving this sort of garland. And as a result, she ends up in last place and they're not able to catch up from it, despite the good attitudes they try to have.
All right, let's talk about how this leg all came together. Our teams were going to head to Sweden, and Todd is going to be the most pumped up to find out. We're going to do some skydiving.
Yeah, I would imagine a lot of teams do this. Back in the days, the teams would just buy like an atlas of the area when they're in the airport just to like get accustomed with the landmarks or perhaps get some maps that would be of use. I would imagine nowadays in the age of the internet that especially when you're given like a destination to go to, that a lot of these teams are like, "Oh, can we research this place, find out how to get there and what it is?" But I think because of the big spectacle of skydiving and especially Ashley's initial reaction, it had to make the edit to just provide this incredible moment, which was getting to see like quite literal oppositional reactions of Todd being pumped beyond belief and Ashley like having every ounce of her digestive system fall into the bottom of her shorts.
Mike, does skydiving make for good, amazing racing?
It depends on what you mean by good, amazing racing. If you mean here is a task that could have teams passing other teams, no. This is basically, we haven't really ever seen a team chicken out from doing, with the exception of Mika back during the water slide, like, oh my God, this height task is so debilitating. I can't do this. And we lose the race because of it. Especially when you're up there in the plane at 10,000 feet. I understand that fears can absolutely amount to something physical, but like, I don't think you're not getting out of the plane at that point, especially with $1 million on the line. So from like an actual entertainment perspective, no, it's just people falling out of planes one right after the other. It does lead to some fun character moments, though, getting to watch Joel's beard get brushed up like he's in a wind tunnel. And obviously, Ashley's like 0 to 100 mood, much like the speed at which she was going, where she is literally screaming her head off getting out of the plane, and then it immediately turns to screams of ecstasy of like, oh my God, this is the best thing that could have
I'm
happened.
going to do it again.
Yeah. I mean, that's incredible. I know that it's something that's not usual to the Amazing Race. I feel like where people are suddenly becoming adrenaline junkies because of it. I feel like you come onto the race already being one, or like a Claire from last season being like, I got that done and I don't want to do it again. So it's nice to see someone
Mhm.
like Ashley be like, do I love skydiving now? Did I
Mhm.
just find my new thing?
So for the teams in the skydiving, it's basically like everybody was up in the plane at the same time. They drew numbers, but it seemed like that everybody they just fell out of the plane like one after each other. I thought that it was a fun moment where I think it was I'm sorry, Joel and Garrett, and then Steve and Annalie had gotten their numbers for the
Oh, yes.
skydiving like it was a bakery. And then here comes Greg and John. They missed the thing. And Steve and Annalie and Joel and Garrett are like, don't tell him. Don't.
Yeah. I mean, this is wild because you even like misorder. Greg and John, surprise, surprise, get there first, but
Yeah.
they missed the number. And that's right after John's like, I just feel like I have these dreams, these premonitions that we're going to miss these little things and not realize it until it's too late. Lo and behold, that came to fruition. And granted, maybe it is sort of like the taped up express passes taken sign from a couple weeks ago that like it's almost too imperceptible if you're not spotting the forest for the trees. But it was an interesting moment. And I was also very surprised that, okay, Greg and John pass it. Okay, this might be the thing that gets them down to fifth. But then after Joel and Garrett and Stephen and Ali, the other two teams are missing it. And so now they turn this into an improbable needle in a haystack task where now they're searching around this random airfield trying to find these little placards with numbers on them.
Hmm. And ultimately, they find it. It amounts to absolutely nothing. But it was a fun moment. I couldn't
Yeah,
help but notice.
I did like Joel just being like, "Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. I wish I would have helped you, but you're just too dominant at this point. So sorry."
Yeah, they really have Greg and John on the mind.
Yeah, they're the machines. I
They
mean,
call them the
how
machines.
could they
Yeah.
not be? They won 4 legs in a row. That's one away. And Joel and Garrett being the combo breakers this episode. Were that not the case, and Greg and John finish in first place, that ties a record in
Mhm.
Amazing Race history. Like, yeah, they're the machines.
I couldn't help but notice the sign that was where they had to pick their numbers. Did you happen to see this, Mike?
I mean, Greg and John certainly didn't, but do tell.
Yes. So the sign, I couldn't help but notice the sign that read EJ Infart.
Seems like there was a boys' night going on at the
Yeah,
airstrip.
boys' night. I did look on Google Translate. Edge infart does translate to no driveway.
Oh, okay. Well, maybe I should visit Sweden more often if there's fun little choice phrases like that.
I'm like, did that sign say infart? And it's like, yep, it
I
did.
mean, if you edge and fart, I cannot think of a worse way to just put your date night to an end.
Okay. So we go from skydiving, and then we get to where who wants to party? Okay. Make a wreath and put it on the maypole. Mike, do you know anything about maypoles?
Oh yeah, my back when my wife's family lived on a vineyard, they hosted the Beltane Festival every year, which is the Celtic
Wow.
ceremony of it's sort of like the celebration of spring, the celebration of reproduction in particular, and the maypole itself, I might be butchering some words here, Rob, but basically it's a giant penis. That's the symbol.
Okay. All
There's
right.
this there's a whole ceremony in Beltane where all the men take this giant maypole on their shoulders. They parade around the grounds going, "Ho, ho, ho," and they hoist it into the air, occasionally on beat, and then they get to the hole, and then they put it in, and they take it out, and they put it in, and then they take it out, and then
Wow.
finally they put it in one final time before raising it, and then all the ribbons unfurl and all the children dance around the phallic object.
Yeah, it was not lost on me that the wreaths and the maypole was somewhat of a phallic drawing.
Yeah, which I think is probably in theming with the end game of the Amazing Race 35, considering we have one woman left in the final
Mhm.
four.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So, who wants to party? Work on the wreath and the maypole. And then ultimately, this is where Rob and Corey are going to use their express pass. And they kind of regret it, but should they have, Mike?
I really love their logic here. I mean, we talked about this with Morgan and Lena as to like, if you're just using it to be like, oh, we want to get out to a lead, and especially early on in the race where there's so much more wiggle room, they obviously had a much better opportunity to use it, which was, oh my God, we're in second to last place at a needle in a haystack roadblock. Let's use it right here, right now. Rob and Corey, I don't begrudge how they used it whatsoever. I love their line of thinking that they were definitely going to use it on a roadblock or a detour, which granted, there may have been a route info to really trip them up. Arguably, the thing that tripped them up the most was a route info, though I don't know how you use an express pass on that route info. Like,
Hmm.
does the cameraman just say, yeah, go in there, go see the violinist? But
Hmm.
I like their thinking about roadblock versus detour, where they said, basically, two heads are better than one. We're usually good at the detours. Maybe last week's the exception, but usually we're good at the detours. We'd much rather have something that we can work together on rather than a task that only one of us can work on. And I'm not sure. I think it was maybe Rob who did the bouquet task back in Vietnam. I was trying to remember who did that. I don't remember how well they did, but I also wonder if they had that in their heads as well of like, if this is something similar to that floral arrangement, I don't feel great about it. So let me use it here. Guarantee I get out at least a little bit ahead of all the other teams that are here. And then at least if the detour is a little bit of trouble, I have something to fall back onto.
Yeah, when we saw that only Anna Lee does it and it's so easy, it's like, oh, that was kind of a waste of the express pass. But then when we see how much other people ended up struggling, like Ashley and some of the other teams, I don't think this was the worst use of the express pass in the world. But then when they see that Steve and Annalie have already beaten them to the next thing, they're like, oh, we're idiots.
Yeah, but also at the same time, like they weren't using it to get first. They said at the beginning of this, like they're just using it to guarantee they make it to the final four. And so, like, if it's purely for survival, as opposed to again how Morgan and Lena's use was perceived to us, which is like, oh, we want to get a first place finish. I am more forgiving with how they used it. Not to mention, like, there's a lot of race to go, and again, all the teams were so scrunched together. I think Greg and John said they had maybe a 5-minute lead at that roadblock that, yeah, maybe uses as an opportunity to get out ahead of at least some other teams. So then if you do fall back on either a detour or getting lost, getting to a freaking subway, then okay, at least you have some things to fall back on where other teams are struggling as well.
All right, so the teams would go from the roadblock to head on foot to the Royal Dramatic Theater.
Yes, and it was quite dramatic for Rob and Corey as they just couldn't figure it out. They showed up late for the show and like half the doors were locked. You're trying to figure out how to get in there, but it culminated in them actually leaving the theater and I don't know, doing their own sort of processional around the
Hmm.
outside of it while Stephen and Annalie just kind of walking in and like, where'd they go? There's the
Hmm.
violinist. I hear them.
Can't find the entrance or couldn't find the way in. I
But
thought that.
what's interesting though is that the previously on feels like teams realize they're not gonna help each other anymore. And we see Corey, doing that slow walk past Joel of like, don't see me, don't see me. Here though, Robin Corey and Steve and Anna Lee pretty much worked together for the rest of the leg,
Mhm.
which I don't know if they brought that up on the previously on to show some sort of discrepancy, or if this does mean like a true turning of the worm for Robin Corey that they're like, hey, we're out in the lead, might as well work with them. It was just a very distinct shift.
Yeah. It had been like a storyline with a lot of like Robin and Chelsea throughout the course of the
Mhm.
season. And we'll see if like how much longer teams are going to work together. I mean, we're at the final four, so I don't know how much it behooves them.
Yeah, I think if it's a matter I think for them it was, we're out in the lead, we might as well work together to, like, help ourselves guarantee we don't get eliminated, which I think is very different than, "Okay, we're just gonna help you despite the fact that we're in last place." And I think Final Four is kinda that breaking point where they say, "Okay, all bets are off, anything goes," especially since we have seen that these 4 teams in particular can be, like, very competitive with one another despite how dominant Greg and John have been for the entirety of this race, so I would be more inclined to say this was a one-time thing, but it was really interesting again how much they set it up as like, look at Corey not acknowledging Joel last time. And now he's Mr. Salvation Army ringing the red bucket, telling Stephen and Annalie a bus is not a subway.
I thought that Joel and Garrett had the most awkward interaction with the violinist.
Because Garrett thought it was a viola.
It just seemed like that. I felt like that she was like, "Okay, here's the clue."
Well, Joel is going to bring something up at the recycling plant that is something I guess new we know about him, which is all clue givers get a hug. Did he ask the violinist for a hug and we didn't see it?
I didn't notice that. No, I did not know that that was a thing.
Yeah, he said that when he asked the recycling guy to give him a hug after giving his clue, and I did not realize that was a trend. Listen, consent is important, so I'm glad Joel asked
Mhm.
for it. At the same time, how many of these people want to hug this sweaty, hairy man?
Do you
They're
think that
just
he hugged the violinist and that we didn't end up seeing it, but then he had to hug the next person to make it not weird?
oh, that's interesting. Like maybe he hugged the violinist and is like, oh, that's gonna be really weird to my wife and kids. Okay,
Yes,
the
I
next clue giver
hug
I see,
all the clue givers. All right, bring it in.
so he'll hug Phil, he'll hug the greeter at the
Everybody.
mat.
Yeah, you
I
got
listen,
to.
it's a good cover on Joel's part.
Mhm. Okay. Then we're gonna see the teams go from getting the clue from the Royal Dramatic Theater to head to the Solna Centrum station. That's where you take a train to get there, not a bus.
Yes, and I will say again, these stations are beautiful. Considering again the infrastructure that I'm personally used to, being a member
Hmm.
of the tri-state area in subway stations, I would love to get off somewhere and just see like
An
beautiful
art
murals in front of
installation.
me.
Yeah. Yeah. What kind of art do you typically see, Mike?
Pee
Hmm.
on the walls. Posters from like movies that came out in 2019 because the other ones have been ripped down.
So, all right, then the teams had to do either sort or serve. Only one team was going to be serving, and I felt like the Amazing Race did make a meal out of that. No pun
Mhm.
intended. But most of our teams are going to be sorting. Did you have any idea how much recycling is going on in Sweden?
99%? They're
That
importing their
sounds high.
recycling? I
That
mean,
sounds
listen,
high.
I know Scandinavia has been, shown in studies to be, like, one of the happiest places to live in the world, but, like, it's just getting more and more appealing by the hour, I suppose, the more things I find out about them, though I don't know
They do have
if
barcodes on all the ships.
Oh god, incredible dad joke from Joel, by the way. But I like if you do recycle so much in Sweden, do you think you have to go to one of these plants and do it yourself? Do you have to junk your own refrigerator, or do you think the people at the recycling plant do that for you?
Yeah, I have so many questions of that they're bringing in all of this trash and recycling all of the toilets and refrigerators and just things I didn't even know you could recycle.
I mean, I suppose everything is recyclable from a certain perspective. But yeah, I thought it'd be the usual things you recycle: glass, plastic, paper, not porcelain. That was
Mhm.
the thing. This was definitely our like weekly, okay, this feels more like a tough as nails challenge task of, okay, let's demo this tub and throw it in it. I did love the cathartic aspect from it,
Yeah.
especially for Todd and Ashley. Rob, when I was part of a fraternity, every uh every year during pledge week we would do what was known as tough night, which was kind of laughable considering the composition of our fraternity. But they would bring in a bunch of TVs and random things from the junkyard, and pledges would take to it with hammers, and so they would just absolutely destroy stuff,
Wow.
try to exude as much masculinity as possible. So I got to experience firsthand how cathartic just the art of smashing an inanimate object can be, going on 10 years at this point.
Well, we had the Amazing Race Challenge. I don't remember what season it was. I think it was in Japan, where the teams had to do the like smash room.
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah. And they had to like smash a certain amount to like maybe I'm thinking about a challenge from the challenge to like get it through a grate or something. But
Mhm.
yeah, I mean, there is something nice, especially at that incredibly stressful point. Any mistake can lose you out on $1 million. Absolutely take it out on some refrigerators. Absolutely ride your bike into the wall. Throw the tires, much like, again, a tough as nails overtime challenge we saw.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. So, we got the teams sorting and recycling. They loved it. These teams. Everybody had fun.
Yeah, do you think Greg and John in retrospect regretted it? Just because, like, it seems, again, like almost therapy, a nice mental health checkpoint on The Amazing Race that they missed out on by having to essentially run kitchen and bar for the Nobel Prize ceremony.
I don't know. They did a really good job. So I don't think that they're necessarily going to have any
Oh,
regrets
and
about
you
choosing
know,
this. Yeah.
production was so happy because look at like what went into that. They had to have all those extras get dressed to the nines, sitting down. You had to have a room festooned with all of these dishes, with all of these placards. You had to fill basically an entire
All
restaurant,
this
stage
French
it.
food. Right.
Yeah, imagine if no teams took that. Production would be livid at that idea that they basically got
Hmm.
all dressed up with nowhere to go.
Yeah. So they ended up getting to use it. We'll talk about that in a second. But for Joel and Garrett, also, we find out was it Joel that is a big wrestling fan and got to
Yeah.
pretend that he was Hulk Hogan or Andre the Giant?
Yeah, I mean, I think that Joel would be the one to rhyme with anything that his partner said, a la Fezzik, I think his name is from Princess Bride.
Hmm.
Also, Joel, can you like reference which era Hulk Hogan? Just curious.
Yeah. Well, there was a Hulk Hogan with a beard at one point.
Oh, really? Was it as long as Joel's?
No, definitely not. Yeah, it was actually kind of like yours, Mike.
Ah, okay. Yeah, because I would say I feel like, and I'm sure there are WWE wrestlers, especially given like the aesthetic nowadays, that would have that long of a beard, but it feels counterintuitive to like your entire thing. Do you want that much hair for people to be able to grab onto?
Ideally not, but it's for an aesthetic. I mean, I feel like that he does look like a Jim the Anvil Neidhart.
Okay, that could be someone completely fictional, and I would buy it 100%. Jim the Anvil Nightheart.
Let me see if I can bring up a Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Okay, maybe
I'm just
from
surprised that Joel didn't try to like break a sink over his knee or something if he's really such a big
mhm.
wrestling fan, or give it the people's elbow.
Yeah. Well, I think he likes really old wrestling.
Hmm.
He likes wrestling like from the 80s. Okay.
Oh, okay.
Let me see. All right. R.I.P. Jim the Anvil Neidhart.
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, Jim the Anvil Neidhart. Let me see if I can bring this up as we are way in the weeds now. What do you
Oh,
think?
he
Could
does
this
though,
be?
look at that. Aw, he took Joel's initial outfit for the Amazing Race that they wouldn't let him wear.
Yeah. So
Why is it
a
such a low
classic wrestler.
cut? That's
Yeah,
not even a tank top. That's
yeah.
basically a belt with straps.
Yeah. Look, Mike, this is what they wore in the 90s.
I grew up in the 90s. I don't think they did. I know
I
I'm
don't
dressed
know.
like I'm someone from a band in the early 2000s, but I remember the 90s.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk about Greg and John and their serving and their strategy. They really did a good job with this. I was very impressed.
Well, it was, I wouldn't say a 5-hole. Maybe we should I won't do this with just in absentia. Should we rate like 5 holes on a scale where it's like 1 to 5 hole? You
Yeah.
know, because if we're doing that, I would just call this maybe like a 3 hole because Greg obviously has a large working knowledge of French, so it's something that definitely would help them in
But
the
it's not
task.
their job. Like he doesn't
Right.
like work in a French restaurant. Like he did at one point talk about with the wreaths. He's like, well, this is now when we have to start debugging.
Well, yeah, that's bringing back to get the picture, right?
Hmm.
Of okay, start debugging when we make mistakes. But this was like, this is the reason why they're the machines. This was a pitch perfect way to approach what was demonstrably the harder of the detour tasks. And they did it in the perfect way, which is you don't need to memorize the entire thing. This isn't like the mustard challenge where you have to parrot back
Hmm.
exactly what was told to you. You just need to memorize like the first word or like a word that looks unique so that, oh, you can spot it easily. Now, I think a working knowledge of the French language probably helps with that, where you would know what each word meant. So you're not just memorizing the word for sandwich,
Yeah.
but yeah, they killed this, right? They didn't
They
fail
did a
once.
great job. I was a little confused about how this was going to work. So we had like the 4 Nobel Prize winners for 4 different years, but then it seemed like, did you bring out like was each table like a certain course, and each person had like, okay, bring out the first course from a certain year to all the people at this one table?
So it's like if there was another alumni gathering for like survivor players, it would be like if they had named certain meal selections like the Amazon, Tocantins, Cambodia. And so it's like
Okay.
then you have to go and figure out, okay, the Cambodia dish involves this, this, and this. And then you basically had to like match up the plate to the person who was designated based on like the year that that person had won the Nobel Prize.
Because what was confusing to me was like, okay, so it's like, all right, here was like what the dish was for 1911. And like, it would make sense to me, even if there was like a table that was like 1911 and bring out the like the 4 dishes that were served and that meal. But it seemed like that they were bringing out like the like first course just to from different years all to the same table.
Well, I think it was that the person was the year, not the
Hmm.
table. And so it was a matter of because they also memorized it in like a certain order. They said, "Okay, this is 1912, this is 1931, etc., etc." I listen, I was a fan of this. I believe we've been to Sweden technically 4 seasons beforehand, but really 3. And I think in the second one that we went to, they did like a dynamite challenge in honor of Alfred Nobel.
Oh my
So it was
God.
fun to see like a Nobel Prize challenge.
Yeah. Can you talk about how it was 4 times, but actually three?
Yeah, so in the last time we actually went to Sweden technically, which was an Amazing Race 25, they literally did a task in Sweden where they drove like from the border to Sweden to a bridge to do a task and then drove to Denmark, which is where they spent the rest of the leg. So like technically they went there, but they didn't spend as much time in it as they did. And I think it was season 6, as we talked about last week, 15, and I think 17 were the 3. So it's been a
Mhm.
long time since we've been to Sweden in a really meaningful way.
Okay. Well, then we then had our teams go from the detour and then head to the Pampas Marina to then get the clue to go find where the mat was. And so that's when everybody's going to be in this mad scramble to the mat.
Yeah, I mean, let's look, Amazing Race does their hardest to create hard but memorable tasks for these teams to push them to their fullest extent. But sometimes the most struggle they'll have is trying to figure out how to get to a freaking subway station.
Hmm.
That's just the race in a nutshell. And I do appreciate the producers, again, at least trying to throw in a bunch of route infos and places to go to try to jumble up the situation. They got it to, on the one hand, with Joel and Garrett passing the top 3 teams, but unfortunately, it didn't work out in their favor when Todd and Ashley are, again, just so far behind that they can't catch up.
Mike, let's talk about our teams and how they ultimately fared this week. Okay, Joel and Garrett, first place of the season. Is this a harbinger of what's to come? Could this be the winning team from the Amazing Race?
I really hope so, and I love them finishing in first. They are by far, in my opinion, the people who have the best surprise reactions at the mat, between them thinking they were dead last and Andrea and Milena getting eliminated instead of them during Phil's, again, still incredibly awkward. We're going to a brand new country. The good news is you will still get that chance to visit that country. You're not getting eliminated.
Hmm.
On the other hand, while it's always good to have a first place finish and it proves your worth, I am a little hesitant just based on the circumstances that it's not that they didn't deserve first place, but kind of the only reason they got first place was because the other three teams got lost. And that's just like an extraordinary lightning striking circumstance. So listen, I could be surprised. All the teams are going to be together in Ireland. There could be a world where they net a second first place finish or even eke it out to the finale and get it there. But I do feel like, as much as I absolutely love these guys, I do think from a skill perspective, they're a bit of a step down from the
Hmm.
other three teams that ironically they finished ahead of this leg.
Got a little nervous for Joel and Garrett. We got the personal story bump.
Hmm.
That was it. We Joel or Garrett. We found out about his daughter.
Garrett was the one that
Garrett.
revealed his daughter with special needs, has cerebral palsy, talked about how his daughter inspires him because she is able to like work with her disability and make a life out of it. So it shows like, listen, if she can do that, given her capabilities, why can't I? I agree though. I was getting nervous. Look, we pegged these guys last week for either fifth place or fourth place. So I had thought, and especially when Garrett fails at the wreath and ends up falling further into the back of the pack, I thought like, okay, these guys are one bad task or one, navigational miss away from getting eliminated. But it was quite the opposite. So no matter where the ride stops, I'm just happy to be on it at all with these two guys. And who knows if they're able to succeed where one team fails next week, they're looking in the finale.
So for Joel and Garrett, I'd love to see them
Yeah.
end up getting there, but I also think that there's probably a greater chance they're the team that ends up in fourth place next week.
Yeah, I think if you do like pound for pound comparing them with the other racers they're up against, I think they are number four. That being said, the advent of the Amazing Race, what can make it so fun and so frustrating at the same time is like all that matters is that you don't come in last. And
Hmm.
so, again, if another team happens to have a worse day than they do, then they're in the finale.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll see if Joel and Garrett can keep this hot streak going. Okay. And the team they beat out, wow, so close to history. I mean,
Yeah.
had they been able to find the mat, it would have been four in a row for
Five in a
Greg
row.
and John.
Yeah.
Five in a row. Oh my
Yeah,
God.
they would have gotten the thumb, as Jim from Jim and Misty, may he rest in peace, like to say, and which would have tied Justin and Diana as a record for most leg wins in a row. And they nearly got there, despite missing the number placard at first, despite getting to the Midsummer in third place and failing their first wreath check. These guys were able to like put together a showing in an incredibly hard detour, catch up with these other two teams, and then beat them to the mat because they're so damn fast. Like every week, despite the fact that these guys took a step back, they took a step forward, in my opinion, of just having everything it takes to walk away $1 million right at
They're
the end of
so
this.
good, Mike, but I'm just concerned about them where we had that moment in the episode where I'm not sure if it was Greg or John, but just to have the foreshadowing of like, oh man, the best teams, you could just screw up one challenge and not win.
I mean, I had thought that was a foreshadowing of them missing the number card and not being team number one in that way. To your point, it could be foreshadowing for them blowing something, I would imagine, in the finale. I mean, we saw this last season where, and even 2 seasons ago as well, where it comes down to two or even three teams at one final task right before the pit stop. That's usually a choke point. And that could be a point where you quite literally choke and another team passes you by. It's certainly in the cards for Greg and John, but I feel like the way they've gone about making mistakes and recovering from them has been one of the best we've seen from a team so far. So even if they do, I still think they have the capabilities to recover from it and somehow wind up in first yet again. They nearly did this leg.
Yeah. Also, are they a victim of their own success in that? Do you think other teams do not want to help them, as we saw with when they were not getting any information from Joel and Garrett and from Steve and Annalie?
I definitely do, but as we mentioned before, I think the final four is really, at least at the very like latest, the point where all bets are off and teams are like, we're just gonna race on our own because again, it's such a tight window for you to squeeze into to make it to the finale. So I think this is the most we'll get of teams not working with Greg and John. We're not gonna get like an Andy and Tommy season 19 situation where the other three teams are gonna be like, let's box them out of the finale and gang up together. And again, even if they do, my money still might be on Greg and John just because they're so good.
Okay. Greg and John, second place. Rob and Corey, Mike, interestingly enough, Mike and Corey have never had a first place finish on this season of The Amazing Race. 10 legs. That's surprising to me.
Yeah, and I think they are really proving what we've seen from a few winners of the Amazing Race, which is like consistency is the most important thing, and how it's not how you start, it's how you finish. The only leg you need to come in first place in is the last one. Because I think the circumstances with which they've consistently not finished in first has either been teams have just done a lot better than them in that leg, or like they'll make a small mistake or choose the more time waste detour, and as a result far a bit further behind. So maybe it's a bit of my bias is showing just because I love the guys. I could still very easily see them taking first place as soon as next leg. We've seen that with other teams as well. Brooke and Scott, I think, only had their first place finish in the penultimate leg of season 29. And I think Rob and Corey are stable enough and consistent enough. It's clear they had a lot of thinking into their express pass use. And I think if they do things right, check all the boxes next leg, I could see them get their first place finish.
Yeah, do you think that they will continue to work with Steve and Annalie moving forward?
Again, I don't necessarily think so. I think especially like Anna Lee might just be so competitive that she's like, nope, not working with y'all anymore. All bets are off right now. And so, and I would imagine again, we saw Corey like leave Joel in the dust if it came down to him getting above another team when he felt like he was at risk. And considering that I think at the final four, all teams have to feel at risk at some point, I think you can't be doing this at this point.
All right. Anything else about Rob and Corey, Mike?
No, we didn't get any sort of like, oh, Rob's an expert on all Nobel Peace Prize winners. So unfortunately, we missed out on that tidbit this week.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of like NATO adjacent. I feel like that he would probably know a lot about that.
Well, I mean, Sweden, I believe, is in NATO. So I suppose it's like a topic nested within another topic.
Yeah. Okay. Then our fourth place team, it's Steve and Annalie. And I thought it was such a bounce back week for them until ultimately at the very end. I mean, this could be their one weakness is that Steve is very slow.
Yeah, I mean, he is the oldest person left in the race by a fair margin. I think, to your point, this leg was the best and worst things about Steve and Annalie. The best is, again, they have such good attention to detail. Annalie has this ability to just absolutely beast her way through these challenges, having people second guess their own methods. But the worst can come in being able to keep up with these other teams from a foot race capacity.
Mhm.
And I know that the finale has become less about like, oh my God, it's a foot race to the pit stop. We very rarely get that. But the majority of final legs are like on foot, make your way around a city for the day. And I could see a world where just like Steve really gets slowed down. I mean, he was having a rough time by the time they got to the pit stop. And that was after a significant amount of running. So I am nervous for the two of them. I think to that point, I don't think they're going to win the Amazing Race.
Okay. Mike, question for you. How old is Steve?
Steve is I want to say he's 51.
Oh, okay. He's 54.
Okay, look at you,
Yes.
Steve.
Look at you, Steve. But I would have guessed it's 68. Like I feel like that they treat Steve like he is like an elderly person.
Well, Annalie, I remember, is really young. I think Annalie is like 23. And so, listen, no judgment to people that would have kids late in life, but like, that would be big. That'd be
Mhm.
40-year-old Steve raising a baby.
I'd watch it. It'd be a good show.
Raisin Steve.
Yeah. Okay. So Annalie really, has been such a speed demon on some of these tasks. So I'm rooting for them just on the strength of Annalie.
Yeah, and I think we also got to get a little bit of their Achilles heel in like them bickering back and forth. It was obviously not nearly as bad as the self-driving, but you got a little bit of spatting about like Annalie basically telling her dad to hurry him up at every circumstance, and him basically replying with like, "I'm trying my best." So I expect we're going to get more of that, especially as the stakes keep increasing.
Okay. All right. And then finally, Todd and Ashley. I mean, we got to see Todd and Ashley in true Todd and Ashley form this week as Todd, the big golden retriever of this season of The
He
Amazing
literally is
Race.
Air Bud. He's a golden retriever that played basketball.
Yeah, he was so excited to go and do skydiving. And then ultimately, even when they were down and out, he still had a positive mindset.
Yeah, I mean, it's really interesting to have had them interact on the train, especially compared to like Robin and Chelsea, who were not seen as the most positive beacons of light, but even used in that moment to think, let's just be grateful for the time that we have. Todd was, I think, trying to like glom onto that, and Ashley was having nothing of it, even after experiencing this exhilarating skydive. And I can understand it from her perspective if she feels like she was the one to cost her team the race because it was theoretically her not doing as well on the wreaths that failed the team. It would definitely have me in my feels, let alone her. But it was also very fun to like have that back and forth of Todd saying, you know what? We're really blessed to be here. And Ashley's like, that's loser talk.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that's the great lesson of The Amazing Race is that you go do it and then you find out you don't need $1 million.
Yeah, Rob, I know that's one of your reality TV pet peeves, though, right? Or have you come around in your own Steve Twilight age about people that are like, I feel like the true winner, even though I didn't win?
Yeah, I mean, it's not one of my favorite things when people declare themselves the winner when they are not. But, like I still can see the value. I don't want to say that my cold heart, can ever see the value in like, okay, we like sort of like learn something new about our relationship and that we have a deeper understanding of each other and our family and an appreciation. So I don't want to necessarily say, I don't think this was exactly what they did. I think that like a little bit more annoying when people in their final words of Survivor say like, you know what, I am the winner.
Mm-hmm. I mean, also just to eulogize them, I really enjoyed the energy that Todd and Ashley were bringing because, like, Todd was the golden retriever, but he was like the golden retriever in the meme where he's sitting behind the computer and says, "I have no idea what I'm doing," because he was the one that was like pioneering. Oh, I'll give you the answer if you let me jump to the front of the line. Oh, let's work together on all this stuff, which I'm really intrigued to get their opinions on like Robin and Chelsea. I know that both of our interviews with Chelsea, she certainly shed some light on her perspective of the whole like does not play well with others sort of
Mhm.
critique that they've been receiving.
She
And
didn't
so,
like it.
yeah, I think she's like, listen, we worked with teams. We just didn't work with Todd and Ashley and Steve and Annalie, and they weren't happy about it. And they were the most vocal behind it. So I'm excited to get their perspective. As Todd talked about, we have to remember they said 5, 6 years ago this wouldn't have happened. I mean, maybe it would have happened just in a much more toxic variety. They would have been one of those like couples on The Amazing Race that you're like, I don't think I want to see this happen on reality television. Feels a bit too much of a window into your relationship. But the fact that they were able to, produce a healthy, happy family from that and race around the world together. And even if they had their differences, they still like walked out with their very tall heads held high. I'm happy. I did not see them going out in this spot. And honestly, I wish their time in Stockholm brought a bit more climacticism. But at the
Mhm.
same time, when you're looking at the journey versus the destination, much like a subway stop, I enjoyed it.
Yeah. And I guess what they ultimately learned in Stockholm was to love their tormentor, The Amazing Race.
Exactly. They fell in love with it after being tortured over the course of a day. Much
Mhm.
like Midsommar, they were just immersed in flowers and became indoctrinated into this hellacious cult.
Mike, where are we headed to next? Are we spending another leg here in Sweden?
No, no, we're going off to the wee Emerald Isle. We're off to Ireland for our penultimate leg.
Okay.
And I'm so excited, Rob, because if it looks like what I think it looks like, we're doing some river dance next week.
Okay. All right. Um,
Listen, we love when teams sing. We love when teams dance. I feel like we have not gotten that really at all. The pot routine was maybe the closest thing we've gotten to it, but it was more about the pot than anything. So I'm really excited. I'm very excited for Joel and Garrett and Rob and Steve to have to dance in
mhm.
particular.
Yeah, so it'll really come down to whether it's a roadblock or a detour. I think that that's really going to be a big determining factor in terms of who gets through this. Because I feel like, okay, Annalie could ace it, but I feel like if Joel and Garrett both have to do something,
Yeah.
I think this could be tricky. We know even Corey had so much trouble earlier in the season with balancing the pot on his head. So yeah, we'll see.
Yeah. Makes me excited though, because again, that's going to create some more variance. I hope there's a lot of placement shifting. Again, these are four capable teams and they're all close together. They'll all be arriving in Ireland together. So, penultimate legs, anything typically goes. So, I'm excited. I'm expecting a Joel and Garrett boot here coming up next, but we could be surprised. Stranger things have happened, but we're but a fortnight away, Rob, from the finale of The Amazing Race
Yep.
35. It's already come
Okay.
to a close.
Yep, coming up, looking like December 13th will be the
Mhm.
Amazing Race 35 finale. Mike, anything else about episode 10?
No, I think again from my perspective, still a little bit of a step down, much like that downward slope that they went down on the biggest ski jump in Slovenia. That's kind of been the trajectory of the season the past couple weeks, but I'm still enjoying it mostly because I really enjoy these teams, and I'm excited for what's to come in these next 2 weeks, regardless of the outcome or the composition of the tasks. I think it should be a lot of fun, and especially getting to talk about it with you and Jess to close out the year.
Okay. All right. We've got just 2 weeks left of the Amazing Race before we crown our winner. Still, we'll talk with Todd and Ashley coming up on Thursday. Jess and I will be speaking with them. And Mike, of course, will have his interview for parade.com. Mike, what else is coming up for you?
Well, because of the Turkey Day celebrations, of course, all the CBS exit press got belatedly pushed to this past Monday. So, in case you missed it, we just mentioned it, but I know Robin, Jess, as well as myself, spoke with Chelsea. Robin was unfortunately not able to make it. Really fun interview. Got a lot of perspectives, in particular, again, into like her reaction to the edit, their choice to not necessarily work with other teams or work with them from certain perspectives. So, again, that's the fun part about these interviews is like getting people's perspectives from their own journey on the race. So definitely recommend that one. Also spoke with the most recently voted out Survivor contestant, as well as the most recently voted out Survivor contestant from this week. Up at parade.com with that as well. B&B had a really fun one this past week,
Yeah.
joined by Ali Lasher, but then had a surprise cameo from Omar Zahir. My God, that's Omar Zahir's music. He's like Anvil himself, coming in to drop the anvil by assigning birds to the
Mhm.
Survivor 45 contestants. I learned a lot about birds, and I think you all will as well. And we'll be having Puya on this week to break down what I thought was a really fun episode of Survivor. And then post-show recaps, talking Battlestar Galactica, continuing to talk Fargo. Really enjoyed the first two episodes of Fargo. Season 5, episode 1 might have been my favorite episodes in quite some time. So doing that every week with Grace Leader and Latanya Starks. Hey, the holidays are coming around as well. And if you,
Yes.
for some reason, want to get a Mike Bloom cameo under the
Oh,
tree for your loved one, you can go onto my cameo at
will
a
you
Mike
wear a
Bloom.
costume for people?
I have and I will. I have
Yes.
done it many times before. This is now a part of the repertoire. So if you would like me to undergo my own form of Stockholm syndrome torture and wear this absolute mane on my head as I talk about any sort of random subject around the reality TV sphere or otherwise, I would be more than happy to do so for the low, low price of $15. You can check that out. Same
Yes.
handle as I have on social media at a Mike Bloom type.
Yes, I see you in wearing different costumes here on Cameo. So, yeah, go ahead. Best $15 you're going to spend this holiday season.
Yeah, it'll for less than a price of 5 subway/bus trips to your local theater, you could,
Mhm.
check out one of my cameos.
All right. And we've got a lot going on here on Robin's podcast, including everything going on from Survivor this week, but also we've been covering Squid Game, the challenge. Mike, have you
Yes.
consumed all of that?
I am currently, at this time we're speaking, halfway through the most recent
Wow.
batch of episodes. I mean, I posted one of the clips from episode 5 on there. There's some wild stuff happening. I mean, I wish that the challenge had like recruited people in a way that other reality shows do, because there are a couple duos from the Squid Game challenge or whatever it's called that I would love to see on The Amazing Race together.
Okay. We'll see. Maybe Squid Game, the challenge people could make the jump over to other challenges on
Mhm.
Paramount Mountain. And so we'll see if that happens. Chappelle and I got into everything from week 1 on Monday. And then on Friday, we will be bringing you our second batch of Squid Game recaps. We're going to do that live at 1 p.m. Eastern on Friday. So a lot of great stuff going on here on Rob is a Podcast. Make sure you subscribe to everything we're doing. RobIsAWebsite.com/subscribe. Thank you so much for joining us. Take care, everybody. Have a good one. Bye.